I think it's a time of great daring. And if we dare, there is just so much creation right now. And daring is about being vulnerable, daring to not hide between voice messages or LinkedIn posts, but actually like pick up the phone and say like, whoa, that was challenging. Are we going to speak about it? Right. So I think this vocalization, like I like that you say, like, let's go deeper because there's like, can we vocalize our language around what happens and really speak about it without layers of trauma, without layerings? Like we all go through, I would say, a trauma of, let's say, if it's all the new world, but it is challenging. And let's just name it. That kind of daring, but finding beauty in that naming and finding curiosity in the naming, right?
Hi, I'm Rudy De Wale, and this is Voices of Emergence, where inner transformation meets systemic regeneration. Today we welcome Ida Faldbakken, an ecosystem builder, narrative strategist, and cultural futurist, working at the intersection of technology, art, and systemic change. Ida's work spans grassroots innovation and high-level strategy, curating large-scale gatherings like Katapult in Oslo, weaving global communities and shaping the ethical frontiers of emerging technologies. Whether advising philanthropists, building decentralized cultural infrastructure, or hosting spaces for embodied leadership, Ida brings a deep commitment to coherence, creativity, and equity. She moves fluently between worlds, from Web3 labs and impact funds to yoga studios and editorial think tanks, always with one guiding question: how can we design futures that honor both technological possibility and human dignity? Together, we explore how cross-disciplinary intelligence, embodied practice, and radical imagination might help us build infrastructures, inner and outer, for a more regenerative, just, and joyful world. Let's listen not just to Ida's words, but to what lives beneath them: the myths, the silences, the shape-shifting edge between structure and soul. So welcome, Ida. How are you?
Thank you, Rudy. I'm well. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah. And so this is Voices of Emergence. So we want to interview basically and give a voice to the people that are working in that emergent field of, what is happening all over the place in building a different world than the one we are witnessing right now. So less about extraction and all that, and more about emergence of, inciting life and regeneration. So when you hear the word emergence, what lands in your body?
Oh, wow. Change, opportunity, creation, uh, growth, novelty, kind of a feeling of a crippling feeling, a feeling of excitement, of potential.
That's great, Ida. Can you trace a moment in your life when you realize you are here to facilitate change, to create, ripples and waves in the world?
Well, to start with that, I am adopted, right? So I think with that kind of emergent story or that starting story, it is something about just being of the world. And it's not about being rootless, like without roots, but it's actually carrying that change with and wherever I go. So I just think that it's like something that is within me. And that realization, I'm not sure if it traced it to a particular time, but it's again back to emergent. It is sort of, yeah, it's a flow. It's just a being, it's a becoming.
Mm. So Ida, yeah, you're also in the field of, you're always on the edges, of innovation, as I know you. So what has brought you here? This part of like, what were the sparks, or what were perhaps the, cathartic moments in your story, in your journey that brought you here and bring you this excitement and passion and interest for, working on the edges of innovation and progress?
One key factor is this deep curiosity. Like I'm just insanely curious. Can't help myself, right? But it is also a being of beauty. I love beauty. Like I think so many things are beautiful, and I get curious about like how does it create? Who creates it? Why do we create it? Right between us, and this sense of maybe building of that is like this wonder. Like what is wonderless? Like what can we wonder about? So I think it's a combination of being, it just drives me there. But to pin it down a little bit, I was also brought up by artists and they live on these, edges always. So it's a combination there, obviously. It's a practice as well as a pure curation and intuition, I guess.
I'd love to dive deeper into that. How has growing up with artists and how has art influenced your life, even as you deal with business and business people? Has art emerged as a strong influence in your life?
Yeah. When it comes to truth and truth seeking, when it comes to friction, to live in complexity, to stay with, finding beauty in comfort and discomfort, like that point or that edge or whatever it is, where it just like feels a little bit like kind of, oh, is this bearable, unbearable? That point, I see it as the creative act, and it can be super vulnerable, full of strength, almost devastating, but somehow artists just knows that they need to be there to be able to create. I think entrepreneurs have it, like many people have it. We call it creativity, we call it art, but I think it's kind of a practice that anyone actually could go into, but it is a vulnerable place. It's not for everyone, maybe.
Yeah, I recognize that as well. And I think quest for beauty is one of the most beautiful and powerful quests that we can, embody, right, these days. So you work with a lot of leaders also. I wanted to, hear from you and your experience of like what leadership patterns do you see breaking down and what's trying to emerge, from these, entrepreneurs and leaders that you see in your communities.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Honestly, if they're honest, right now, I lost a little bit of faith. I think actually we are, maybe to put it differently, there was like this huge flow, like we need like more mindful leadership, compassionate leadership, soft leadership. But then there is this, system leadership. But then it seems like, oh, are we a little bit lost? Do people know what they're doing? Or is this just words or buzzwords? Like, what really do we need to let go of to truly, do that change or that transition or that bridge? And I think, again, back to, creativity and creative resilience, I think it's a moment of uncomfortableness. And I think it's a practice of complexity and carrying that complexity and that uncomfortable space. And that is where I have lost a little bit of faith lately, because I see a lot of pulling back from it, not being able to be authentic and not being able to be aligned, but it's like, we'll just take this shortcut. So now I'm a little bit on the fence. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but on the other side, I think it will emerge. We just need this little kind of period of transformational transition, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard it described that what we're witnessing in the world is like the last hurrah of the old system. Like the old system knows it's over, but it has this like second wind surge of energy to try to remain. It's like the ego that doesn't want to die, just like hangs on one last time. And so it's very strong, and we all see it so strongly. But given that, do you see what needs to change? Do you see like systems that are changing and are breaking down? And how does this create creative, compassionate, soft, Yeah, these are very feminine qualities. And we could say that leadership until now has been very masculine oriented, kind of controlling and dominating. Do you believe that there's more of a creative, mindful, compassionate, intuitive leadership that's ready to emerge?
I'm not sure if I agree on creativity as being soft. I actually see creativity as quite rough. You have to kind of stand with it, fight your own demons, or kill that, ego, that last breath of the dragon inside, that is the ego. And I think that is what's happening now. And if people are willing to dare to do that, to take that lead, those are the people I know that I want to work with. And I can only speak for myself because I'm very precise of the people actually dare to take that step, take the risk, and do the work, men or women, doesn't matter, is the people that I would like to surround myself with. So I think if it's male, female, for me, it doesn't matter. Soft, more kind of abrupt, or like bold. I think we need force, but maybe we need a more grounded force, right? Did I answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. And I agree with you that creativity also requires courage. You're
Yeah.
you're at the edge of culture, edge of society, and it takes courage to show up like that. To be vulnerable in front of people with your creativity, your ideas takes a lot of courage.
It's terrifying.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I want to go a bit deeper in there because to me, what we are seeing now in the world is basically a massive shadow that we haven't been, dealing with for the last decades, 100 years, or whatever. So, and I think it's also the inability of us of not dealing with trauma. Yeah, or what we are seeing is huge collective trauma that is now basically being thrown into the internet or on the internet, and everybody's just like spitting it out. And so we will. To me, it has a lot to do with not male and female, but to masculine and feminine energies. Yeah, because they are not gender dependent. They are energies that we both have. Each human being has them. We both have a mother, a father, and a mother.
Mm.
And because these energies are out of balance, that we go into very, immature or wounded type of masculinity and wounded type of femininity. And that's what we see in leadership, because that leadership is not integrated. These energies are not integrated or cannot be fully expressed and balanced because they are not balanced. So the leadership that I see now emerging are basically the people who are doing that deep inner work, of like transformation. This is actually what it's about. And to hold, actually being able to hold the space in between the polarities, because the internet and technologies have been accelerating polarities, the last couple of decades. And now we're going into a huge, exponential stream of that. So, and we're going to need people who are going to stand in the fire, in the middle, to hold that balance of these polarities. So how do you see that work happen, or how do you experience that in your communities, in your work? Because I also know that you are going back to study, I understood well.
Yeah, well, okay, let's take that as an example, right? Because I did, and I just finalized a master thesis, which is so, I'm in my late 40s. I quit my job, and it's funny how people react. It's like some people will say like, "Oh, amazing, you're going back to study. I so envy you." Other people will be like, "Oh, poor you," like, "Oh, I like, like almost looking down upon it." While others are like, how do you dare that? I could never do that. I will lose my job or position and all these things. And it's just interesting to see these different reactions. And I must say that the leaders and the people that I would love to work with are the people who actually say like, wow, that's interesting. I would love to do that. Right. And also the people like, what do you learn or something like being on that part. because I think it's a time of great daring, and if we dare, there is just so much creation right now, and daring is about daring being vulnerable, daring to not hide between, you know, voice messages or LinkedIn posts, but actually like pick up the phone and say like, whoa, that was challenging. Are we going to speak about it? Right. So this, I think this vocalization, you know, like I like that you say like, let's go deeper, because there's like, can we vocalize our language around what happens and really speak about it without layers of trauma, without layerings? Like we all go through, I would say, a trauma of, let's say, if it's all the new world, but it is challenging. And let's just name it. That kind of daring, but finding beauty in that naming and finding curiosity in the naming, right?
It's very exciting, the daring. So what I hear from you is the daring, the creativity. I also hear from you the need to be grounded. And
Yeah.
I myself practice indigenous rituals like the Vision Quest and the Sun Dance, which are Lakota tradition rites of passage. And so there's something about the indigenous, their approach to nature, the way they sense the world, the things they know, which is different than what you find in the city. And so my question to you is how does like the ancestral memory and the mythology and the mythic and even the silence, how does that inform your approach to innovation, to the future, to technology?
For once, I am a very strong believer in rituals. Extremely. Because there's something about, well, I connected to practice or practices or having a practice, which I connect to commitment, which I connect to grounders pledge, which I connect to lineages, you know, things that happen this whole time. If we break that chain, we break something in, you know, ourselves, society, our relationships, and so on. And when it comes to lineages, it's like ancestors. For me, is different, or maybe it's not that different, but in a way, right? Because I'm adopted, so I have no idea or knowledge about my biological, you know, context or environment. But that said, it's super present, right? Like sometimes I a lot of times when maybe even how that is today, like if I really gonna answer something, I close my eye and I'm just like, whoa, I just, you know, try to feel it. What is the feeling? What is the answer? What is it? And then I think I speak to that lineage. I seek advice in the body, in the nervous system, but that body and that nervous system is connected to the roots, to the lineage, to the wisdom of ancestors, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I believe in that as well. There is the epigenetics that we know, from the science perspective, but we not always have to, look for science. If we just look at nature, we can have the seed of an oak tree, or the oak nut, and it carries all the information of like, that oak tree, that it's going to grow, that's going to host multiple, bacteria and mycelium and so many connections, and even host, insects and fungi, and also, animals and all that. So that's all this information from the root is actually carried, from any plant, from any living species or being on this planet. And so, I truly believe also that everyone should actually look into their own lineage and own ancestral lineage of like, what do we carry with us? And sometimes it's very hard to find. For us Europeans, for example, it's really hard to find because most of it has been, all the Celtic knowledge and different, tribes that were living before the Romans, all that has been wiped out, thousands of years ago already. And so now we're seeing indigenous tribes that also they're losing their land in the Amazon, and that's now, but there's a lot of wisdom. I think it's also like Tyson Yunkaporte says in his Sand Talk, like in the ancestral lineage and all that. And I know that you also started a new agency, the Lineage Office, if I'm correct.
Mhm.
And I wanted to ask also, like, are there any rituals that you are using in your practice, like with business leaders or with leaders or in your work?
Yeah, and I think it connects to this, right? And the word lineage, it connects to wisdom. And the office is just to contradict it to, the classical office or the corner office and say like, well, this is what if we build, offices or efforts as a lineage, and like with the awareness of the lineage already, what will happen then, right? And one of the questions that I raise is like, we have these investment vehicle that we call impact investing. What if we are speaking about wisdom investing? What if wisdom was one metric for investing? So I'm not doing this act or this action if it doesn't leads to wisdom, if it hasn't carried wisdom with it. How would that change? Because my question is more like, I think when we put something like impact is disconnected and instrumentalized from ourselves. The wisdom is something that is maybe a layer deeper and that connects deeper, right? And it's not knowledge, it's wisdom. So that's the Lineage Office. And the idea with the Lineage Office, it's literally about, and it's not an office in that per se, it's more like, what is this agency, the human agency of different knowledges that we together as a community apply to create, imagine and reimagine, or I would actually imagine grounded forward, new social imaginaries, new social realities, new narratives that we can create meaning around. That is what I'm talking about. And this is what I would like through the creative practice to work with leaders around. Fight your dragon, bring in the wisdom, and imagine grounded forward.
Yeah, this is interesting. When you talk about going from impact to wisdom investing, it's a like the metrics that are used are different, and there's a culture shift that needs to happen, and we go away from what we used to think was important and economically important to new kinds of values and values that are more nature oriented, humanity oriented. And so it really requires some kind of culture shift in people to now start looking at those.
Yeah.
What have you learned from running Katapult and also creating Genter Code? I think Yenter Code, Girls Code, and Norway Makers and other communities and gatherings. What have you learned about creating these as vehicles for culture shift?
Well, that's a good question. And thank you for the question. I haven't thought about that journey actually previously, but obviously I am a cross-disciplinary thinker and interdisciplinary thinker. My education from way back, bachelor's degrees and so on, and early days of university was always in the cross-disciplinary, interdisciplinary topics. And being curious, technology is something that was always, that came into my life. I just like to understand and read the newspaper. Like 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I needed to start to understand technology and its social impact, right? So when the makers movement came up and became super popular, for me, that was just beautiful with Chris Anderson and, the book that I think he calls Makers or something, that is combining technology, art, and, this creating stuff, building stuff. And then the question about the cooler girls who code, it is then again, like we need more women, we need girls, one, into investment, building the products, but also like this idea, like we need everyone to be creators and not only users. And just in context, this is like 12, 13 years ago, right? That we started this. So that was this beautiful moment of like seeing all these girls that they were around 10, 11 in Norway, and we filled the library, right? With 3D printers and small coding tools and Legos and stuff like that. And they were just like, there was so much energy. So combining this, so that joy of creation, and then fast forward, curating and doing Katapult, again, bringing in a large degree of entrepreneurs, a large degree of capital and investment, but still with this cross-disciplinary lens and mix of demographic, and say like, what is in this core of human creation? What can we make together? And I think that is, for me, the starting point for all communication. And to put it very simply, is like, if you can imagine creating a meal together, someone makes the salad, someone boils the pasta, someone chops the onions, someone makes dessert, and then you sit together and you enjoy it. And I think that is what I'm seeking all the time.
Yes, interesting, very recognizable also. Yeah, I want to come back, because in the beginning of the show you said something about that you're a bit less enthusiastic about, what is happening now in all these communities. So when there are changes, or when basically, the funding fades, there's always these periods of like this innovation, core innovation, early adopters, the investment comes in, and then it's a flow of like, it becomes a force, of innovation. But then now we have seen a lot also in the, green and sustainability movement, that has been a lot of disappointment due to the political changes everywhere. So how do you tend to the coherence of a community when, the spotlight or the funding fades, and when, the sustained trust or in post-institutional or decentralized world is fading? So what are the elements that you would gather in your communities, or that you apply in your communities or use in your communities?
Yeah, one answer is that it's, again, back to the lineage, and we need to create these communities so they're self-sustainable. We cannot continue to do this codependent, I would say power dynamic led of one founder, whether that is institutional and public money, or if that is like one main principle that is funding whatever initiative. Because as soon as the money dries up, as soon as, even if the money dries up in the sense of the trend is shifting, like, everyone was investing in crypto, and then ChatGPT was launched, and then everyone went to AI, and it's like, it's just these cycles. So we need to make them sustainable outside of hype cycles, and really think, how are we going to bridge from one place to, let's say, the new world of financial tools, but that cannot be based on the previous setups. It's just not sustainable. No, well, it's not sustainable, is my experience.
Things are moving so quickly. And now we have AI that's kind of even accelerating things even more.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see AI fitting into what's happening in the world now? And how can we create a better relationship with AI? Is there something we should watch out for? I think we're all learning about AI at the same time. So it's difficult to be a prophet, but what is happening, do you think, in terms of AI?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because so you said an example, I was just at the university, right? And I chose a method called grounded theory, which is an inductive method, and it is not deductive. And a lot of, especially in, I would say, European academic traditions, there is a lot of deductive, I would say, research that is rewarded, that is seen as, I would say, the proper research and so on. Because things are moving so fast, I think these, grounded methodologies that are like taking the pulse of what is happening right now and creating theories, like theory creating methods of what is happening right now. So we're creating knowledge with, the existing messiness of human beings as we speak. And then in that process, we will also create new knowledge, which we know that the AI is using old knowledge, predicting, whatever outcome in the future. But we need to create new knowledge. If not, we're feeding it with synthetic knowledge, or it is making synthetic knowledge, right? So I think that is like really important. Like it's on the institutional, educational level, the methodologies that we're using, and that needs a shift. But that is bringing up a lot of friction in academic circles when science that is seen upon or rewarded by grants and funding, right, has a different methodology. So there's a huge trouble happening there. And at least my main approach is like, how can we secure the human agency, like the human creative agency? And again, back to creativity, like how do we train, creative resilience?
Yes. Yeah, that brings me back also to like, how do you see technology? How can we regenerate technology? Because we are in the system of AI where basically the core values are about extraction and, not respecting copyright or original copyright. And yeah, we are blurring the lines of what was acceptable, previously, and we are coming into a new terrain that's going to be entirely differently or can be newly interpreted, by a newer generation. But so especially with technology, I feel that, because of technology and the wrong coding, which was also, don't forget that most of this technology was masculine coded. Most of the coders were just young boys that were into gaming and all that had no sensitivity whatsoever or to the feminine energy. And we are now in this system that is ruling the world, So how can we regenerate technology? I had to laugh today because a friend of mine, a female friend on Facebook, posted like, oh, I was in another show of like where there's like 1 in 5 women in AI, and she said it feels like back like 1993, when they started the internet and all that. And I answered like, well, join regenerative communities because there's 2 in 3 women, so, and it's a lot more fun, it's a lot more healthy, and it's a lot more sustainable. So, but, I believe that truly this needs to change, but, there's also all the underlying economics and the power dynamics that are playing. So how do you see that in your networks? Because there's a lot of technology coders, I think, also, and impact investors. Like, do you see anything moving there, or are there some seeds already planted in that direction?
It's a big question. I honestly don't know how to answer that, because regeneration itself, I'm very like, I'm not sure if I totally understand how to connect that with, I would say, AI. Is it like, yeah, so maybe I have to ask, like, what in this context, what is the meaning of regeneration?
Yeah, well, so let's say that all the AI that we know now, or like ChatGPT, is based on all the information ever written or gathered on the internet.
Yeah.
So, but what if we can feed the AI with ideas that are about, sustaining life and generating life, and all the beautiful work and ideas that can be around that, or what if we feed AI with, great ideas about love and how we can care about each other, instead of using each other or extracting things from each other.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot to do with the business model, of course. It's a big question, I know, but I know some people that are busy with that. And yeah, I just wanted to know in your area, do you see any people that are already busy with that, or even investors interested in that field? Or
Honestly, no. And no, but I think Alex was talking about this is a huge culture shift, right? Yes. So I think there is also a culture shift in how we see ourselves as humans in the age of AI. And culture, as we know, moves so slow and so much slower than technology is doing, right? So we like before there is we even haven't been able to think about like what moral ethical framework should we use now, or what like social imaginaries or like narrative should we like kind of agree upon. Technology has just and moved so much faster than us, so we're constantly kind of playing a game of like catch up in that sense. So how to have some sort of iteratively like smaller maybe culture shifts happening in feedback loops all the time, I would ask. And then I'm back to grounded theories. I'm back to like theory generating mythology. So I'm back to mythology. When it comes to in the impact world, I honestly do not see it right now. Uh, I see a lot of like, how can we use AI to source impact, I don't know, investments, but in that sense, is more used as a tool for existing, I would say, financial models rather than actually a tool for changing existing. That's why I think impact and system investing, I'm not sure about that, is if that is actually happening. I think we need other vehicles like completely. And I think that has to come from the ecosystem themselves without depending on the traditional sources of financial um, help or yeah.
Ida, you mentioned you're adopted, and that's a fascinating story. I am an only child, which
Mhm.
is not the same at all as being adopted. But as an only child, I grew up, feeling like there's only me. I had no siblings, and there's a sense of just aloneness, being being alone in the world, kind of, and growing up more quickly. Um, s- Lately, it's more a sense of sovereignty, like I'm truly responsible for myself.
Mhm.
Um, and so it's an interesting interplay between truly being responsible for myself and relying on community or building community or
Sure.
participating in community, and this interplay of that kind of relationship. But there's also like some kind of great resilience that happens, and I'm sure with the adoptive story, there must be incredible resilience and dealing with ambiguity and complexity and even burnout. And so I wonder how your story helps you deal with what's going on now, the sense of being alone, the sense of building community and relying on community. What is your perspective and worldview?
Well, so my oldest brother, so I have four siblings. We're five. I am the only one that's adopted. I have two older brothers and a little sister and a little brother. But my oldest brother, he had I guess a sense of insecurity of me being adopted, because I think he's been afraid previously that I'm going to leave. I'm going to leave and not come back, right? Because I travel a lot. And one time he looked at me, this is some years ago, and he said, like, Ira, now I understand. You are not leaving. You're like a potted plant. You have your little pot and you just set roots where you are. And I think it helped him more than it helped me because he needed to know that I wasn't leaving, right? But he also painted a picture for me in the sense of, yeah, that's how I feel. So in this turmoil, in this, that we're in, I feel extremely grounded. While I see other that has more, things at risk. I don't have children either, right? Which is that I can just take my potted plant and be somewhere else. But you're right, there is a large sense of resilience because that's how you orient yourself in the world. It can tip over to hypervigilance, of course, but that's when it's important to tap in and create and be part of the communities, right? So it is a constant balance. But there is, I think I inhabit a greater tolerance for taking the lead, daring, and not become overwhelmed of chaos on the contrary.
Amazing, Ida. So what is your what wants to be born now beyond your personal desire or will? Like what feels like your current edge as a woman, as a leader, as a soul? What are your next steps? Do you have an idea on that already or your vision?
Yeah, it is first and foremost human agency and creative resilience in the time that we're in, and using, that power of creativity, that friction, that kind of that with that edge that we were speaking about. And then I have a very clear, I want to create, and back to the Lineage Office again, I want to create a place where people are financial, where I can contribute to people's financial, psychological safety, and that they're reaching their full potential of who they are, right? So it's literally like agency, creativity, full human potential, but while in the process, knowing and having and creating with each other this financial and psychological safety, because I see so much of that not happening at all, even in these ecosystem and environments where people claim to be, impact driven. And it's not essentially most of the time. We know how systems are, but intentionally, in intended consequences, it just happens. The key factor there, it is this um, finding your own role in the system, right? Understanding your own role in the system. And that is a tough one because that's an ego one. An ego is terrible and so wounded.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. To lead a creative life is a big risk because society may not understand, and the artist can be very vulnerable in their creativity, and also it may be financially difficult to live a creative life. And so safety is so important, community is so important. And like we said, AI is not truly creative. AI is just reconfiguring what it already knows. Like AI has a bunch of words and is just predicting what word should come next. And this is not true creativity. It's random. Whether AI is writing a text or drawing a picture, it's doing it based on history, on what is already known. Whereas human creativity is more like on the edge of the unknown. Like human creativity can do things that AI cannot do, right? But as people lose their jobs to AI, you know, they're going to live more creative lives. But these are lives that are higher in insecurity, financially more difficult. And so we come back to safety and community and the importance of creating community and safety to catch people, as we all try to live more creative lives. That's what comes up for me.
Mm.
Does this resonate?
Yeah, but I think it's also about demystifying creativity. Like we're all creative, right? And creative can be sitting with that uncomfortableness. Like, if it's like this is maybe a long stretch, but let's say there is a breakup or a divorce, or let's say you are the parents and is afraid of their child or whatever. It's like it's uncomfortable, but sit with it. That for me is a creative act, right? And then carry it and bury it, but not bury it, right? And try to morph that power, that energy that is within that to something that is creational. I think I want to do like a shout out to people like this guy. He started Kickstarter back in the day. His name is Yancey Stickler, and they have created something called the A Corps. It's like the Artist's Corps, which is a platform where well, artists and artist project or creative projects can be in a one way launched and financed and facilitated by a community. And it's also a rethinking of a financial model and economic model that addresses what you just spoke to about how can we facilitate some sort of financial setup for a world where AI is going to lead to a huge turmoil, a change in jobs. Like if you're educating yourself as a lawyer now, how are you going to go from a junior lawyer to a senior, right? That gap, like, the AI does that. On the other hand, the AI has an extreme processing power. So, I don't know how many more times than the human brain. But the human brain has what the AI hasn't in connections. I don't know, we have 100 billion connections, something, right? And we have emotions. So that's where we are creative, where we can use the AI to just process whatever, more linear things, but it will never be, well, at least not now. I can't say in the future, but still, this is where we are now.
Thank you, Ida. We're coming to the end of the show. And as a last question, I wanted to ask you, like, if you could whisper a message into the heart of every cultural change maker, what would it be?
Trust the friction is creational.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. I love that. And thank you, Ida, for your time and your, also kindness and, standing in the fire, of today. I'm going to recall, the wisdom, investment, and grounded forward, as concepts that we talked about today and that you beautifully explained. So thank you for your time and hope to meet you soon.
Likewise, thank you so much, Rudy, and thank you so much, Alex, for having me here.